get ready for the main event here. Please welcome up Vicki Mayo of TouchPoints CEO. All right.
Hi.
So Vicki is probably one of the most entrepreneurial entrepreneurs I've ever met. She is definitely your definition of a serial entrepreneur. When I heard her story, I was absolutely floored. So I can't wait for you all to hear what she has to say. She's so impressive, and we'll get right to it. So
Thank you, and thank you for having me here, and thank you, Startup Grind.
yeah, absolutely. So Vicki, when did you move here to Arizona? Because you're not a native here, but you did come out here with your family.
So I moved to Arizona when I was 12 years old. My dad was in the hospitality industry, and had one of the top performing hotels for Best Western. And so he came out to the headquarters and had a little bit of extra time and asked everybody, what's Arizona about? What should I see? And everyone kept telling him to see Sedona. So after a lot of cajoling, he finally rented a car. He only made it as far as the village of Oak Creek, saw these amazing, monumental red mountains, and next thing I knew, we were moving here.
This is my favorite place to go on the weekends. I love going hiking in Sedona, so I can see why he would be captivated by it.
Yeah.
So you have a really unique story about how you even got into entrepreneurism. And so tell us about the very first company you started and how old you were. This is impressive.
Thank you. So here I was, moved from Georgia to Arizona, and was a little lonely as a kid, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So my dad and I were talking, and he said, well, why don't you start a company? And I said, great idea. I have a great idea. So I'm 14 years old, and every weekend I would place an ad in the Arizona Republic. This was back when people did that. So talk late mid-90s. And I put an ad in the paper, and I would say, call me at Sedona Reservations, and I had a URL, sedonareservations.com, big deal to have a website. I will book your hotel travel. This was essentially almost like a forerunner to what Expedia would eventually take over and do. So people would call me, I'd book hotels and tours and restaurants, and essentially it was this little boutique travel agency, which I sold when I was 17 before going off to college.
So before she's even legal and adult, she's already had one company and sold it. So already makes me feel real inadequate as a human. But so then you went off to college, and this wasn't even really the beginning of, there are so many things I think have come up in your life that people would have quit and stopped going. But you went off to college. Where did you go? Where did you start off at?
So I actually graduated high school early, and I took 6 months off to ride. So I was an international dressage rider. So I wanted to work with my horseback riding trainer. My parents said, you can finish school early, but you have to go to school. So I actually started off at ASU. Then I moved off to Trinity University, and I was there for a year and a half until a very sort of everything came to a culmination. I was driving after being at the library studying all day, and I actually still to this day have no recollection of what happened. All I know is that I somehow managed to pull over on the side of the road. I had passed out, and the doctors diagnosed me with a heart condition, and I had to move back home to have heart surgery. So I was 18 years old, and the heart surgery was ultimately unsuccessful, and I spent the next 12 years of my life trying to manage and deal with my heart. So I came back to Arizona, went to ASU for a semester, and decided it was a little too close to home. So I went to the only politically correct university in the state, which of course is NAU, because no one cares if you're a lumberjack. Go Lumberjacks! And then that was my college story.
Yeah, and then so what did you go to school for?
So I actually have 2 degrees. One is in political science. I knew I wanted to be an attorney because I wanted to help people. I didn't think everyone was guilty. I would say that all the time. And then I also got a secondary degree in hospitality. So I finished my schooling pretty quickly. I did heavy credits, and my dad looked at me and he was like, you're not graduating, you're too young. So I had grown up in the hospitality industry. Remember, I had Sedona Reservations. I knew hospitality was going to be a breeze, plus half of our classes were at bars. So it was the logical choice.
That's awesome. And then you went on, you continued your education after that, right?
I did. I actually ended up going to law school as well later.
Yeah. So just a few things. And then what's really amazing is even still at a very young age, I think you took into perspective a really caring heart, I think. It was really impressive. Vicki told me that she adopted this 13 and 14-year-old, their brothers, and at the age of 20. So tell us, like, how did you end up adopting 2 boys at the age of 20?
So one of them is right there.
Aww.
Say hi.
Hey.
That's Jyoti. So he's the younger one of my 2 boys. Right. For the record, also the very extroverted, boisterous one.
Kind of runs in
The family,
yeah.
right? It's funny, we're actually very, very similar. People really thought that like we were truly related because we're so similar. But sort of interesting course of events. We're of the Sikh faith, both Jyoti, Amin, and I had been going to our local temple, and I had seen the boys actually when they first came from India, and I'd seen them, for quite some time. And one day they just didn't come as much anymore. So I started asking around, and come to find out, their parents had been deported, and they came home from school one day, and basically their parents never came back. And they were living by themselves in this apartment, and they were kind of working odd jobs and trying to go to school. And I was very upset by it because people were helping them. They would drop off food or drop off money, but no one ever took them in and said, come live with me. And I didn't think it was right. So a lesson that I always tell to entrepreneurs, and I always say, I think naivete is your best friend, because sometimes you make decisions because you think it's the right decision, and it turns out to be right. And if you listen to experience or what other people tell you, they'll tell you it's not right. So I graduated from college at 20, and I drove to the boys' apartment, and I picked them up. And I said, I'm going to be your mom now. So I became an overnight mom at 20.
Yeah, let's talk about I'm floored by her life, and she's only gotten to the age of 20 so far, so let's keep going.
Thanks. So what would you like to hear next?
Yeah. So how did you, at the age of 20, find a way to support your family?
So that was really tough. So here I am 20. My parents were so furious with me, they actually disowned me. They're originally from India, and so the immigrant mentality as a woman is my job was to get married. And now who was going to marry me now that I had 2 teenage boys, which now thinking back on it, I'm like, my goodness, I had just took in 2 teenage boys. But so my parents were very upset, and they didn't necessarily agree with my decision. So initially it was very tough. I had realized that when you're 20, the really grown-up thing to do is to buy a house, and this was the days of 100% financing. And so I went out and bought a house at like 7.5% interest rate. I mean, insanity. So every penny I made was going towards paying this crazy mortgage. And I knew the only way that I could still be there for the kids and be responsible was to work for myself. So I started my next company, which was a mortgage company. And I went out and got loans, and I worked really hard that first year. I mean, really hard. The kids would be like, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm researching unique loans. I mean, this is really what I would be doing at midnight. And so we made it through.
It's amazing. So, and then I think you have another really cool story, too, about how you met your husband. So if you want to tell a little bit of that story.
Sure. So those of you guys that have boys or know about teenage boys, they're all trouble. All trouble. So I thought, teenage boys, what are they going to do? They're going to do drugs and have sex. And I'm like, so what am I going to do to not let them do drugs and have sex? And I thought, I'm just going to make them so tired, they have absolutely no chance of getting in trouble. So I put my poor boys in every single sport I could find. I mean, every single sport. So they would run from practice to practice to practice to practice and come home and do homework and then pass out. So one of the sports I put him into was field hockey. So being of the Indian culture, in India, the second biggest sport after cricket is field hockey. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to put the kids in field hockey. They're going to make Indian friends. They're going to learn about their culture. Well, I show up at field hockey, and their hockey coach, for the record, if anyone ever sees my husband, super dorky. I just kind of didn't think about him. Well, 6 months later, we ended up going to a hockey tournament, and we sort of hit it off. 6 months after that, he asked me to marry him. And 3 months after that, we had this amazing 7-day wedding in India. So a little bit of the whirlwind.
and then you started another company then after the mortgage company as well. Kind of share a little bit of that story, what it was, and okay.
Certainly. So I started a hotel management company. So again, that was my background. I had a degree in hospitality, something that I was comfortable with. And I knew the Sedona market because I had done Sedona reservations. So this was very easy for me. I knew how to market. I knew how to really make it run successfully. So I started managing properties in Sedona, and then that business just kept growing. And I started getting opportunities to consult nationally for boutique hotels. So I did that for quite some time, a couple of years. And during that time, I had my first biological son, who's now 9, and then I had my daughter. And my daughter was born ill. So while she was in my stomach, I had very difficult pregnancies, but while I was in my very last month, my umbilical cord shut, and the blood was actually cut off to her. So when she was born, she was bright red, because every cell in her body had turned into oxygen to keep her alive. So when she was born, she cried all the time. I mean, nobody would watch her. I mean, like, nobody would watch her, not even my mom. And so I couldn't commute back and forth to Sedona, and I couldn't travel. I couldn't keep that schedule. And I was so thrilled. 3 boys. Finally had, like, this gorgeous little girl. It was not even a choice. Or it was not even, like, a decision I had to make. I just knew. I'm gonna stop working, and I'm gonna stay home with her, and I'm gonna find a way to make her feel better. So it was a long year, and then she finally started feeling better. But I stopped doing the hotel business.
And then you went to a medical conference, right? Is that what happened? Or no? It was a conference where you met your co-founder. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, there was one piece in between.
Okay, let's back it up then. Okay, all right.
So during this time, my husband had started an IT company, and it was called Valor IT, and he wanted to grow it. So he's very visionary, a big picture thinker, but he needed someone who could execute. So about this time, Mare was 2, and I was getting a little antsy. I'd been home for a year. And he said, why don't you come and be my VP/my COO? And I said, done. So over a very quick amount of time, we grew the company globally. So it went from 20 employees to over 1,300. We opened up sites in Costa Rica and the Philippines and scaled everything up. So I have a tech background. I learned tech and call center while I was at Valor. And during all this time, I realized, gosh, my son at this time is definitely not normal. Like, he's really strange. Like, he was reading at 2 and telling me all these very smart things. And so I kind of researched and found out that he was gifted. So there's a great community for gifted individuals here in Arizona. So I went to this conference, and there was this keynote speaker, and everything she had to say was like magic. I mean, I still to this day have all the notes I took, because everything she was saying was for my son. I'm like, yes, he does this, and this is how I should handle it. So after the conference, I walked up to her and I was like, I don't know who you are and you don't know who I am, but we're gonna be best friends. And that was actually Dr. Amy Sarin. So that was 8 years ago. And fast forward about a couple of years ago, we decided to start TouchPoint.
That's awesome. So what was kind of that nagging question in your mind that you wanted to answer with TouchPoints? What was that initial pain point that you wanted to go solve?
Right, so again, that darling little girl, Mare, she's 4, and was crying all night. She had these horrible night terrors. So I would be up with her, all night, and you can't wake up a child when they have night terrors. So I would just stay up with her, and I would wake up in the morning exhausted. So I called Amy one day, because now we'd become really good friends, mommy friends, and I was just complaining about how tired I was. And she said, well, why don't you try this technology that I invented? And I was like, okay. She's like, I spent a decade, researching this, and I know that it works. So that night, during a particularly heinous night terror, I put what would later become the TouchPoints in Mare's little hands, and within 30 seconds, she fell asleep. And the next morning, she woke up happy. And I couldn't believe it. So as soon as I dropped her off to school, I called Amy, and I said, what was that technology, and what are we going to do about it? So from my life, from adopting the kids to working in the foster care system, I always knew my passion in life was to help people, and my purpose is I'm really good at business. And so with TouchPoint, I told Amy, I want to take this, I want to make this affordable, and I want to make this accessible. I want to make this technology available for everyone, because you don't have to be stressed out. There's other options for you. And so my purpose and my passion were truly able to intersect at TouchPoint, and that's why we decided to partner together and bring this amazing technology to the world.
Cool. So creating a wearable is rather difficult. Like there's a lot that's involved with design, with figuring out, hey, is this thing actually going to work when I bring it to market? Is it expensive? So there's something really cool that you did in order to even fund it to begin with. So let's talk about just how you funded it, and then we'll kind of go in through how you actually began to design the device. So let's talk about like your crowdfunding experience.
Yeah. So it is really hard to make a wearable, but remember when I said naivete is your best friend? So I was like, sure, I mean, I can build a wearable. What do I know? It's going to be great. So again, I really believe heavily in that concept. So we use crowdfunding, and we used it twice now, and I'm such a big proponent of it. When we first launched in December, we had built out designs, and we were very close to finalizing everything and actually going into production. So we launched on Kickstarter. And it was a fantastic way to get the product out because, and also just to garner support from an initial community. So our Kickstarter supporters continue to support us today. In fact, they were the first backers for our second campaign on Indiegogo.
It's amazing. How did you get the word out about the initial campaign? What advice can you give people that, so obviously venture capital, angel funding is one way to go about getting funding for your business, bootstrapping is of course another, and then crowdfunding is increasingly popular, but I think a lot of campaigns die on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. They don't have enough traction. So how did you build the audience to even get to where you are at?
So something to understand about crowdfunding is that 60% of your revenue is going to come from what you generate. I think a lot of people have a different expectation. They're like, I'm just going to put it out there and see how it goes. Well, failure to plan is planning to fail. And so when it comes to something like a Kickstarter, you have to really make a very robust marketing plan. And so our marketing plan, I literally had written out 45 days before launch, do this, and then 10 days. And we had even planned out what emails were going to go out, every day during the campaign. What tweets were we going to be putting out? What Facebook posts? We had pre-drafted blog posts. All of that preparation is really important. And a really great resource is on Reddit. I know, the front page of the internet. There's actually really great threads that talk about what are some tips to crowdfunding. And I actually really scoured Reddit when I was trying to prep and learn. And there was great posts about tips to try and websites to visit. So I highly recommend that. But really what kickstarts your campaign is having a strong social media base and or a high email list. So there's an app called EverContact. It's about $200 to download, but one of the best investments you'll ever make. You download it, and it actually pulls every single person that ever emailed you or you ever emailed out of your Outlook. And it goes onto Gmail too. So you can build up your email list really quickly, And then I would suggest using a MailChimp or something with the dummy account to get everybody to opt in so you don't get blacklisted. Then you can make a real email account.
Good advice.
I'm being honest.
So then the next step to actually having a crowdfunding campaign is to deliver the product that you said you were going to deliver. And I think a lot of crowdfunding campaigns are really notorious for not actually delivering. I mean, there's these horrible nightmare stories. So how did you make sure that you were not one of these nightmare Kickstarter stories?
So again, I think people have this expectation, I have a really great idea, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to fund it. And assuming you can garner the support to get your campaign funded, I think that there's a little disconnect between how hard it really is to get a product out. So my suggestion to people is don't go out to crowdfund when you only have an idea. I really feel strongly that if you're going to be successful and you're going to have something to stand on, you should wait until you're actually almost placing that production order, or maybe you're already in production and you use it as a pre-sales venue. That's really the best way, because if you have too long of a delay between when people order your product and you deliver it, you're going to start getting inundated by refunds and people saying my product didn't come out, and then you're going to be battling this uphill battle on social media. People think you're a scam. So it's a really fine line, but I would say if you're going to launch some kind of a crowdfunding campaign, don't have more than a 3-month out timeline when you're going to deliver.
Great. And then how did you even begin sorting out the process to get a wearable product into the market? How did you get design? How did you get the actual plastics? That's a huge, I wouldn't even know where to start, so.
I didn't know where to start either. So what I did was I was like, a wearable. Well, it has to have plastic on the outside. I literally started calling local plastic houses, and I was like, hi, I was thinking about doing a wearable, so can you guys make plastics for me? And someone asked me, one of these plastic houses were like, well, do you even have designs? And I said, well, no, do I have to hire someone to do that for me? And so I thought that you did the designs for me. And they were like, no, you need someone to like model everything for you. So I said, well, who do you recommend? So then I called and they said, this is my list of who I recommend. So I called every single plastic house back and I said, hey, do you have a list of people you recommend? So another piece of advice, don't ever give up. It's okay to ask dumb questions, just start. Because if you just start, all the pieces will fall into place. But I think people you get stuck and I'm scared to ask the questions. Just ask them.
When you start asking the questions, that's when you get the answers.
Yes, yeah.
So that's great. So when you had V1 of your product out, what were the things that you learned about your V1 product that you took with you when you went to design V2?
So we had a lot of initial feedback. So first off, what we thought who we were going to sell to ended up not being who was buying. I thought we were going to sell our wearable just to men, because men seem to like wearables. They like wearing watches. Moms bought our devices. Maybe because we were women and we only knew how to market to women. So suddenly we had this influx of moms buying TouchPoints and using them on their kids. So 2 or 3 months in, I started listening to the customer service team really strongly, and I highly recommend your customers know what's happening, and you have to be in tune with your customers. And the customers were saying things like, we really like this app concept, but we really want TouchPoints to not have an app. We want to be able to use them like when our kids are taking tests or the SATs. I want to take them into a meeting, and I'm not allowed to have my phone in a meeting. So can you make a version that doesn't need an app? So all of that consumer feedback really is what kicked off for us making the TouchPoints basic version, which we also crowdfunded on Indiegogo.
Excellent. So let's talk about, why did you choose Indiegogo this time over Kickstarter? Because Kickstarter was pretty successful for you. You raised, tell everyone how, your percentage over what you were able to raise.
Oh, I don't remember. I think it was like 300 or 400% funded on Kickstarter. I know we were
crazy.
953% funded on Indiegogo.
Wow.
So if anyone's going to do a campaign like I'm offering, I'm happy to help and happy to make introductions to Indiegogo. So the reason why I went to Indiegogo, Indiegogo actually came behind us. I actually talked to an Indiegogo rep. They actually hired a PR person for me to help launch our product. Their back-end interface is so much easier to use than Kickstarter's. I was allowed to pixel my page, meaning I could do a better job of marketing. People look at Kickstarter, and I think that for the right product, it's a good platform, and it does get a lot more views than Indiegogo does. But I think Indiegogo is a lot more friendly towards the entrepreneur putting things out. So we made that decision just by asking around, and especially if you have a product that you're shipping, not just emailing out, Kickstarter does not have a way for you to put in mailing addresses. So I'm sure you can imagine what a nightmare that was to call over 1,000 people and ask them on the phone, can I get your email address, your mailing address? It was really painful.
And so you finish these campaigns, and then you actually do something really unique when it comes to your packaging and how you actually bring this to market. A few months ago, we had Rado Muro of Refresh Glass, who's a really well-known speaker in the conscious capitalism field. So we started to get a little bit of a taste of what conscious capitalism is, but you infuse conscious capitalism right into your business pretty much from the get-go. So tell us a little bit about, one, just for those of you who are not familiar with what conscious capitalism is, if you don't mind just sharing your definition, and then share how you actually brought that into your business.
So there's, a very philosophic, 4-tenet definition of conscious capitalism, but it's at its simplest form. It's just finding ways to give back and having a purpose as far as helping people in your business. And we baked it in from day one. So when we first started the company, we knew that we wanted to make this technology affordable and accessible because it is life-changing. So we started off saying for every 2 touch points we sell, we're going to give 1 away. So that was the first piece that we baked in. It was almost like a Tom's model. And we priced everything knowing that. So we give a portion of every sale, goes straight into a scholarship fund. And every month we have thousands of people that apply for TouchPoints. And we have a whole scholarship committee that reads through all these applications and awards them out. And we give them to foster children, people with autism, people low income that can't afford it. Because the whole reason we did this business was not to make money. It was to help people. Because that's our greatest obligation and our greatest joy in life, is helping people. So we looked forward, how can we give the technology forwards? But we also looked backwards in our supply chain. And we said, how can we integrate this concept of conscious capitalism into the production of our products? So we decided to source everything in the United States. So our touch points are all made right here in Arizona. We use local vendors for everything. So whether it's brochure printing or making the boxes, we use local vendors. But I think what stands out maybe the most, every single box that's shipped out is packaged and fulfilled out of 2 facilities. One, all individuals that are legally blind. They package and fulfill every single box. And because demand has grown so much now, we just 3 weeks ago brought on a second facility with people that have epilepsy or any kind of a developmental disability. So when you're buying a set of touch points, you're helping go forwards, you're helping yourself to be a better person, you're helping yourself to be a better mom, a better dad, a better friend, but you're also giving jobs to our economy and people that wouldn't otherwise have them. People that are legally blind, 75% of them are unemployed.
Wow. So how would you recommend to the founders that are in the audience, how do you begin looking for your purpose? How did you discover this particular cause you're working with the Center for the Blind, right?
Arizona Industries for the Blind.
Okay. How did you pick them, and how do you suggest people go about researching people to partner with for their products?
So I think the first part of the question was, how do you find your purpose? Well, everyone's purpose is different. So my history with adopting the boys and being subjected to the foster care system gave me my initial purpose. I knew that selfishly, when I met with Dr. Saren, I told her, I want to give these to every foster kid in the country. Because if you could give these to a child when they're being taken away from their parents, you're actually inoculating them from the PTSD that's associated with it. And that has been my guiding light. So I find any chance I can to help a foster child. So your purpose and why you want to do this will come from your own personal experience and your own life history. You know, maybe you had a friend or a cousin with autism. Maybe, you know, you grew up without money and food insecurity is something for you. You have to look back at your life. Don't just generate or manufacture something that's a fad. Because if it's not authentic, if it didn't come from your life, it's not going to stick. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is there's some wonderful consultants like this lady in the back, the black dress, that can help you find ways to integrate conscious capitalism into your business. But you can just Google, you know, if you know that you have a need, you know you have a supply chain need, you know that you need a packaging need, just look for companies that have a designation for disabled or disadvantaged. And you can even hire vets. You know, at our IT company, we actually go out of our way to hire vets. So, because of my husband's background. So it's whatever your purpose is, you just have to, unfortunately, Google and dig a little bit. But
great. So what would you say is the low point of being an entrepreneur? There's a lot of amazing things that you've done, but it isn't all, you know, sunshine and rainbows and entrepreneurship. We know that.
yes.
So what would you say, like, what is the thing that was like when you felt like you hit rock bottom as an entrepreneur?
So, fortunately or unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, your highs are so high, but to balance that out, your lows are really, really low. And I don't think there's been any single one. I think that through the years, I've had so many highs and lows. And like I remember at TouchPoint, we had just launched December 1st of 2016, so we've only been in business for 11 months. But it was blockbuster. We had crazy amounts of sales coming in. We did over $250,000 that first month. And it was literally my co-founder, me. I had one graphic designer friend that I roped in. I had one kind of sort of PR person. And I'm like, we can do this, right? And I literally was sitting outside. I had just dropped off. Literally my kids and I had packaged boxes all night. I had just dropped them off at the post office. And I got on the phone and the PR person and the graphic designer called me and they were like, we quit. I sat in the parking lot and cried. I thought, how the hell am I going to get this business going when it's literally just me? I remember like exactly where I was sitting, so you have these low points, and it's just, you have to surround yourself with a community of people that's going to cheer you on, because when you hit those lows, they're low.
Do you feel like you had your co-founder to lean on there, or?
Yes and no. So one, she's a neuropsychologist, so she'd be like, now Vicki, the dopamine in your brain is low now. And I was like, I'm not sure this is really helping me. So yes, she's definitely there, and I think it's great when you have a partner like that, and we get along really well, so that's great, but we do very different things. And I think if you're gonna have a co-founder, I think that's also something to really think about. We don't fight or have arguments, because her expertise is science and research and the technology behind the product. And my responsibilities and my expertise is everything business related. So I don't question her research decisions, and she doesn't question my business decisions. And I think being able to work so perfectly meshed together has really been a key to our success.
So now that we've talked about some of the low points, let's talk about what is the thing that keeps you going as an entrepreneur? Because you went after this way more than once. So what made you decide to come back and start companies over and over and over again? And especially TouchPoints. What's your favorite thing about TouchPoints?
So when I was 6 years old, my cousins had come over to my house, and they had sprayed my brand new Tea Rose perfume everywhere in the whole house. And I was like crying. And I'm like, I cannot believe you just got rid of all my new perfume. And my brother put his arm around me, and he was like, don't worry, sis. Like, you'll figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, I will. And I was like, you go downstairs and start boiling water. My little brother, you go outside and start picking rose leaves. I made them make me Tea Rose perfume. So I refilled my little bottle, and I was like, we still have a whole pot here of Tea Rose perfume. I washed out my little sister's baby food jars. I canned that stuff up, and I hawked it around the neighborhood for $2 a jar. So I knew from the time that I was 6 years old, I was going to be an entrepreneur. So what keeps me going is it's in my DNA. Like, it's not a choice. It's just who I am. Yeah. And with TouchPoint, what keeps me going is the stories. I was actually just sitting over here, I came early, and I was sitting in that room where everybody co-works, and this woman just walked up to me, and she opened her hands, and she's holding the green TouchPoints. She's like, oh my God, these things are amazing. Thank you so much for inventing them. And I'm like, wow, that was really cool. Just a couple weeks ago, I was at a special kids fair, and there was a little boy and his parents that walked in. And the little boy's name was Xander, and he was stimming. He has autism. And I walked over to his dad, and I said, is he upset? And his dad thought I was going to ask him to leave. And I said, no, just hold these TouchPoints and just hand them to your son. So I was doing a talk. I looked in 10 minutes into the talk, and he's sitting still. He stopped shaking. And I looked back at his parents 20 minutes in. He's holding both his parents' hands. His mom has tears rolling down her cheeks, tears. And she came running up to me afterwards, and she was like, you just changed our lives. Like, I don't know what that thing is that you gave him, but it's amazing. And she's come back into the office. Literally, she's like, I just came back to give you a hug. And that's why we do what we do, because we just changed Andrew's life. Like his mom said, for the first time, my son can walk through this museum and not like stim and be hyper overloaded with sensory, that's why we do what we do.
I'm like tearing up here. Okay. That was really cool. So now we're gonna get to Q&A here in a bit, but we're gonna ask some fun questions now. So we're gonna do 21 questions, rapid fire, just to get to know Vicki a little bit more. So cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Sushi or tacos?
Sushi.
Favorite app?
Favorite
app?
The Skim.
Oh, I love the Skim.
I know, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Rockstar founders too. What's your favorite OS? Like Mac or PC?
Oh, PC.
Okay. Really? PC?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you're my first one up here that said PC, so go you.
Go PC.
Favorite holiday?
Diwali. It's the Indian Festival of Lights.
Okay. Favorite car?
Oh, my Jeep. I love my Jeep.
I mean, that makes sense. From Sedona, right?
Right.
Got it.
Right, it's great. I drove it today in my pink dress.
Favorite vacation spot?
Anywhere where there's a beach.
Favorite book?
The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Favorite movie or TV show?
Oh, I'm really obsessed with Silicon Valley right now.
Ooh, yeah. Favorite musical artist?
Probably the Goo Goo Dolls or Dave Matthews Band.
Ooh. Your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, Sweet Home Alabama.
Yes. Do you collect anything?
I do collect shoes, whoever said that.
Do you have any unusual skills or talents?
I can tie a cherry in a knot, like the cherry stem. Does that look unusual?
Your top strength in business?
I'm very process-oriented. Efficiency is like key.
What was your first job? You may have already answered this, but.
Oh, actually, my first real job, I was the art director at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Sedona.
Very cool. What other profession other than your own would you attempt?
Oh, ice cream taste tester, hands down.
I love that. What is the best compliment someone can give you?
I don't know. Best compliment. I think that I'm a caring person, maybe?
Okay. And then what's a cause you're passionate about?
So many. Like foster care issues, top.
Yeah. Who are 5 people alive or dead you want to have dinner with?
Oh, Eminem. Yeah, Kim Kardashian, don't judge me. Don't judge me. I'd like to meet JFK.
Okay.
And Jackie O, does that count?
Yeah.
They count as
They
one?
come together, yeah.
They can come together, okay. And who else do I really want to meet? I want to meet Paulo Coelho so badly. Is that 5?
That's 4.
4?
If we're putting Jackie O and
Okay.
JFK together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Count that.
All right. And then what's one thing on your bucket list?
I have so many. Can I just say I just finished 2 of them and I was very proud of them?
Yeah.
So today is the anniversary. 5 years ago, I climbed to the base camp of Mount Everest.
No.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And my other bucket list item was I actually opened the New York Stock Exchange this summer.
Ooh.
So that was another one.
Cool. All right. Now it's time for some Q&A. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Michelle will come around.
Those were fun.
Would you consider undyed leather instead of plastic for your touch point?
Undyed leather? Yeah, I would consider it. We have some issues with residency, so as long as I could make the product function, I would absolutely consider it.
I follow your touch point things on Facebook, and I noticed there's an ad that you recently did that you're in the Paradise Valley School District, and I'm not sure the capacity of it. My educators and my family, and speaking with my sister who's in administration and my brother-in-law who teaches in high school, there's a huge need for autistic children, a lot of trauma. So what are you doing in PD School District, and is there a way to incorporate touch points for the very low income type of families that these two educate, teach in?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as autism goes, we actually have touch points currently in all the Autism Academies throughout the state. We have them at Gateway Academy. And so for individuals with autism, it is absolutely profound. They put them on in the morning and they leave them on all day. And they're able to integrate, so it's credible. PV School District, actually the district has just allocated funds to be able to use it and give at least 1 set with the goal of getting 5 sets in every single classroom throughout the Paradise Valley District. And it's because they know putting a kid in timeout is not beneficial, right? The children are acting out because they have ADD, they're over-medicated, they're titrating down from medication, or they just have hyperarousal. And so when you give an alternative, like using touch points in the classroom, you're actually helping a child be able to learn. And with ADHD, we have an initial research study going on with Midwestern. We're showing a 13 times improvement in attention span. So if you put that and quantify it, that means in an 8-hour school day, a child would have 3.65 more hours that they would be paying attention and actually absorbing and learning. So we are integrating it. We're happy to expand our scholarship program out to some degree. We're also happy to sell sets at cost because, like I said, it's not about making money. It's about getting this technology out to people that need it. So the classrooms, we have 20 school districts throughout the country that are currently integrating TouchPoints in with the schools. And what they're doing is they're doing an opt-out letter. So they're basically saying, parents, we're excited to try this new technology in the classroom. Here's what it is. If you do not want us to try this technology with your child, please let us know. And they're opting out.
So you definitely do a lot, which is an understatement. So the quick question would be, when do you sleep? But the real question is definitely when your work is your passion, it's really hard to stop working. But it seems like you balance a lot. So what advice can you give on when all your passions and work and everything blend together? How do you find balance?
So when do I sleep? I use my TouchPoints to turn my brain off so I can go to sleep almost every night. And I usually only sleep for like 6 or 7 hours, but I get a good solid 6, 7 hours. As far as this concept of balance, so I've struggled with it, right? People are like, oh, when you leave work at 5, you should like leave work at 5. I have just come to understand and accept that balance is different for everyone. And there are periods of time where it is 24/7 and you simply cannot turn off your brain, and to force yourself to do so is actually more detrimental than to just keep working. But there's other times in life where the pendulum swings the other way. And it's like, I can, go hang out, I'm on vacation, I'm hanging with my kids, I'm doing very little work. And I think once I stopped trying to fit myself into a box of what balance is, I became a lot happier, and it became a lot easier to just disengage, even if it was for a few hours. Like, my husband and I are going out for dinner. I'm going to not talk about work for 2 hours, and I will tell him we are not having any shop talk. And we can really just sit back and hang out and enjoy for 2 hours. And then at the end of 2 hours, you go back and you can engage again. But don't force yourself into, that's just my advice across the board. I think, at least for me personally, I was a lot happier when I stopped trying to chase after the concept of balance. And then too, I use my TouchPoints a lot.
I just figured since you're right here, I'm sure everybody else here is interested too, if you could tell us more about the TouchPoints, that sounds pretty cool.
Certainly. So TouchPoints are these neuroscientific wearables. I'm wearing them now. Mine are pink. They have to be worn in a set. So you have to wear one on either side of your body. And what the TouchPoints do is they, in the broadest sense, they alleviate stress in as little as 30 seconds. And here's how. When you feel stressed out, what you might not realize is that the first thing that engages is your body's fight or flight mechanism, like the sympathetic nervous system. And what it'll do is actually make you feel sick. And it was a survival mechanism that was baked into our DNA millions of years ago. So when you think about something stressful, try it now, think of something stressful, and then notice your body. Subconsciously, your chest may have tightened up, your stomach may be hurting, you may have clenched your shoulders or your teeth, you might have a headache. That is your body's fight or flight system kicking in. When you have the TouchPoints on, your fight or flight system actually completely disengages. And so first off, your body sensation goes away within 30 seconds. And it decreases significantly. Now, secondly, your body will flip into rational, logical thinking. So now, instead of being in the sympathetic nervous system, you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. So you're thinking about the stressful event or the stressful events happening to you, and it's no longer stressful because you're being very logical and rational about it versus emotional. Now, this combination of no body sensation, rational thinking actually creates a new neural pathway in your brain. So what is a neural pathway? If you think about your brain like a gigantic filing cabinet, every event or every thought that happens has a file. And the file is usually, if a stressful event, like talking to your boss, there's lots of papers in that file. And they're really negative. Like every time I talk to my boss, he yells at me. Every time, I always fail with papers. So when you make these new neural pathways, what you're doing is you're putting new papers in your file very rapidly. And the new papers are all like neutral to positive, this event's not that stressful. It doesn't make my stomach hurt. Talking to my boss does not, it's not a stressful event anymore. Your brain will always pull the newest papers first. So you're essentially just reprogramming your brain, and you're inoculating yourself from stress. So if you keep doing this, even just a couple of sessions or a couple of times using your touch points, you actually make any event no longer stressful. So this is why touch points are the only, they were pulled out of the only successful treatment for PTSD.
Any other questions? All right.
What are your goals for TouchPoint 2018?
Well, we have, we're bringing out a new product. So that's really the biggest thing. So it's going to be launched mid next year. So that's really the focus, is putting it out and then just continue growing the user base.
What would be the number one advice you give to any CEO?
So I'm not even just a CEO. It'd be anybody in general. Two things. Number one, your only goal for today is to just be that much better than yesterday. And the second piece is, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is just a little extra. So find that way to do the extra.